we're going to be having a look at Mali. Mali's democracy stands at a critical juncture as the nation grapples with political instability, a military junta, security challenges, and following successive coups and elections, serious questions are now arising about the future of democratic governments in Mali. Just to tell you, historically, Mali used to be part of the Madinka Empire, an empire that used to stretch all the way across the Sahel, which is the southern Sahara. And Timbuktu, for example, used to be a university city, one of the most prominent university cities in the world. Wow, we've lost a lot. Online is Thelma Nyarhi, researcher at the Democracy Development Program at KZN, but currently doing a PhD in Anthropology at the University of Cape Town. Thelma, welcome to African Mirror.
Thank you for having me, and good day to you and your listeners.
Let's just get some context into what we're talking about. Mali, up north from us in the Sahel, the Saharan region, but just give us some background which leads us up to asking the questions today about Mali. Seems like they've gone through some rather troubled times.
Yes, they surely have. So with Mali, it's part of the Sahel region, and this includes Cameroon, Nigeria, and the other junta-led countries, for example, the Niger, Burkina Faso, of course, Mali as well. So while it boasts both human and natural resources, it has had significant political instability, disease outbreaks. I think there's been news around diphtheria outbreaks, around malaria outbreaks, as well as flooding. Seems Sahel is taking a turn in terms of climate, as well as virus demonstrations, really. So in March 2022, the military leader had announced that the country would undergo a 24-month transition schedule where it would then return to civilian rule. And since then, unfortunately, we've had an indication of the opposite, where we see, for one, recently the military leader himself has actually self-promoted himself to the highest military distinction called the Colonel of the Land Army. And this title has only been held by the previous former two heads of state. And, well, he's now the third. And then there's also been situations where politicians, opposing politicians, have been arrested for going against the junta, going against the military rule, and even uttering anything that seems negative within the media. We've also seen the Prime Minister, Shugel Maiga, who also was recently sacked and immediately replaced by the general and spokesperson of the military rule. So since then, a lot has been happening, and it brings us to these two big questions that I pose today, where we are questioning the true intentions of the country's junta, as well within the stewarding nature post-French influence, as well as what kind of political heritage we have today and what it means to actually go against it.
Yeah, I mean, the general, we'll call him that, in Mali, he's 8 to 9 months overdue on his promise, isn't he? Because third of 22 and the third of 24 means that he should have bailed out March this year, November, December. It looks like he's got comfortable in the palace. He likes marble floors and Persian carpets, it seems.
Exactly. I mean, with elections, they were promised to be held in February, and then, well, it was postponed due to technical reasons, which we really do not have any answers to, and it's been postponed indefinitely. So now, even looking at the actual possibility of elections sounds very bleak, because already self-promoting himself is already a true sign that we might not necessarily get to a point of civilian rule anytime soon.
And that certainly is very sad, because Mali has suffered a lot. South African government, under the era of Thabo Mbeki, for example, were responsible for building a library in Timbuktu, the famous university city. And even that library came under threat with the rise of an organization called Ansar al-Din, who were an extremist group, a Salafi group that tried to take over power in Mali, and this is many years ago. So it's a story of unrest, isn't it, going for quite a few years. So, I mean, where do we go from here in terms of Mali? I mean, so many questions, and Mali at the moment, as I say in the classics, going nowhere slowly.
Yeah, I mean, in as much as recently, apparently, it actually teased the possibility of a return to civilian rule in a public engagement, where he had hinted on a possible end to military rule, where he invited members of the government to create the necessary conditions, whatever that may be, for the organization and transparent, organization of transparent and peaceful elections. But at the same time, in as much as this is being teased, it seems like every single year this is the story where there's this possibility of elections might happen, and then the next thing, something else happens that actually says the opposite. And when we look at Afrobarometer statistics, relating it to the actual citizens themselves, last year in the 2023 survey, they'd actually found that 60% of the citizens had actually agreed to choosing leadership through elections, with just approximately 30% believing in alternative measures. And even within those stats, there was this majority belief that didn't actually believe in this idea of a one-party rule. And if you look at the military itself, it almost mimics that, being the only kind of leadership, hierarchy that's within the country. It's already mimicking that. And furthermore, over 70% had actually believed in the army's role in being to govern the country, with 47% agreeing to this. So you find that in as much as, yes, you may find citizens who are actually against this idea of the military ruling, some are still finding it beneficial. And this really goes back to this idea of both Burkina Faso and Mali ideally just capitalizing on the popular discontent with previous democratically elected governments. So I think that's where the problem is, where when you look at your past, you realize that actually it has been worse. There's been corruption, there's been greed, and ideally it hasn't been helping the citizen. And with this idea of military being the one heading the state, it almost seems like it's the citizens' decision to do that. But at the same time, you realize that now, in as much as we had so many politicians agreeing to this, currently a lot of politicians are actually going against this fact and actually calling for civilian rule to actually come back. But what does it mean to actually bring it back as well? And how would we actually go about it?
Indeed, and it may sound stupid, but looking at pictures of General Goita, who took power when the coup, he's put on weight in the last 3 years, which is not a good sign, which tells me he's got very comfortable in the position that he is. It sounds like a really silly statement, but when a general starts putting on weight like that, we're in trouble.
Exactly. And that goes with most leaders. They get comfortable in their seats. But I think the most important thing is actually seeing what this actually means for West Africa. I mean, for one, the unification of the three junta-led countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, has actually challenged the traditional influence of ECOWAS. We've seen this. Also, challenging the external allies, particularly France. At the same time, those countries, in them seeking to assert their sovereignty and reduce dependency on external powers by forming this confederation, they've actually reduced external forces, which I guess is a good sign, particularly for the citizens, because ideally that is what they had in mind. But at the same time, there's also political divisions that are surfacing, where previously politicians were in support of, coups happening, because at that time it was the only way to get rid of corrupt government. But at the same time, now we have situations where we have divisions within those political spaces where now they're actually calling for civilian rule, and wherever such is uttered, arrests happen. And with that, there's also the increased migration as well due to refugees and asylum seekers in neighboring states. And already with that kind of trend following, that also means pressure when it comes to the neighboring states.
And we have to leave it there, unfortunately, on African Mirror, and let's hope that Mali, and of course Niger and Burkina Faso as well, also under military juntas, that they can get back to civilian role. As Thelma correctly points out, they have kicked out the French, but you've got to have something in its place, and that seems to be part of the problem. Thelma Nyarhi, researcher at the Democracy Development Program at KZN, but currently at UCT doing a PhD. Thanks for joining us for this week's version of African Mirror.